The group chat notification was still glowing on my screen when I realized my hands had gone cold. Dad's message: "We think it's best you step away for now." My aunt's thumbs up, like approval stamped on my exile. I typed back slowly, almost politely, "Understood. I'll respect that, and step away from the family fund too." Closing the contribution tab felt like shutting a vault on More Than Money. It felt like sealing their last excuse to keep me tethered. By 2:15 a.m., my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. 89 missed calls by dawn. The voicemail from Dad sounded frantic, as if his certainty had dissolved into static. What happened? The bank flagged everything. I stared at the glowing red notification until it dimmed. Then I wrote back with the same calm they mistook for weakness: "I'm honoring your decision. My name is Lydia Monroe, I'm 27. And if you think you know how this ends, stay tuned." Have you ever had family cross your boundaries, only to panic when you finally honored their words? Let me know in the comments. The keychain on my desk caught the morning light, the small brass key dangling heavier than it should. I'd kept it since childhood, when Mom once whispered, "Keys open more than doors, Lydia." Back then I thought she meant freedom. Now I wondered, what if she meant power? The sun rose, but for me it felt like curtains opening on a play where I finally held the script. Dad called again before I'd even poured coffee. His voice cracked through the voicemail. "Lydia, don't do this. We just meant space, not." He trailed off, as if words themselves had become liabilities. I placed my phone face down on the table. The brass key slid against the wood, leaving a faint scratch. Funny how the smallest things leave marks. At 8 a.m. my cousin Marcy texted, "What did you do? Aunt June says the whole fund froze." I typed, erased, then sent, "I did exactly what Dad asked." The silence that followed was louder than any insult. By noon my aunt finally broke ranks. She showed up at my apartment, hair still in curlers, eyes wide. "You can't just pull out like that," she said, as if I'd unplugged a ventilator. "You knew how many accounts were tied." Her voice cracked. "Do you still wear that perfume? The one from Paris?" The non sequitur almost made me laugh. Dialogue decoys, the Monroe family specialty. When the truth threatens, change the subject. I let the question hang while I opened the window. Cool air cut between us. "You gave me a thumbs up," I said flatly. "Don't pretend you didn't." Her mouth opened, then closed. No comeback. Behind her, a delivery truck idled. The sound filled the pause between us. She turned, muttering, "You've made a mess, Lydia. They'll never forgive you." I closed the window, the brass key warm in my palm. Forgiveness was never the currency. Control was. That evening the group chat lit up like a siren. "Uncle Ray, we need an emergency meeting." "Dad, Lydia, come to the house. We'll talk this through." Marcy added a prayer emoji, as if digital hope could stitch the rip they'd torn. I sat on my couch, scrolling through their words, feeling strangely calm. They hadn't invited me to Thanksgiving last year, hadn't even told me about Marcy's graduation dinner. But now that the numbers stopped moving, I was suddenly indispensable. At 7:03 p.m. the front desk buzzed. A courier stood there with a thin envelope. No return address. My stomach tightened as I slid a finger under the seal. Inside, a photocopy of the trust agreement. My name circled in red ink. Underneath, one handwritten line, "You never understood what you signed." I traced the letters with my thumb. Someone wanted me rattled. Instead, I felt clarity spread through me like light in water. I pulled the original folder from my cabinet. Yes, I'd kept everything. Every clause, every amendment, every small change they thought I wouldn't notice. The brass key lay across the papers, gleaming like punctuation. At 8:22 p.m. Dad called again. I answered this time. His tone was rehearsed, too even. "Sweetheart, you don't know what damage you've done. We can fix this if you just come back." The line crackled. I pictured him gripping the phone with white knuckles. "I didn't cause the damage," I said. "I just turned on the lights." By morning the family group chat had gone silent. That was more dangerous than the flood of calls. Silence meant strategy. I dressed slowly, choosing a black blazer they once mocked as too severe. Severe worked. Severe told the truth before I opened my mouth. The brass key clinked against my phone as I slipped both into my bag. The sound was almost musical, like two parts of a puzzle tapping together. At the bank, the marble floors echoed every step. A manager guided me into a glass-walled office, his hands fidgeting with papers. "Miss Monroe, your request to suspend distributions. It caused quite a stir." "I only followed the bylaws," I said. My voice carried more weight than I expected. Section 12. Any contributor can withdraw support if trust obligations aren't met. They weren't. He cleared his throat. "Your father and aunt insist it was a misunderstanding. Misunderstandings don't leave paper trails." I slid a folder across the desk. "My copies, signed, dated, airtight." His eyes widened, scanning the ink they had hoped I'd never read. When I walked back outside, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcy. "They're furious. Aunt June says you'll regret this." I typed back one word. "Noted." As I crossed the street, I caught my reflection in a store window. Steady eyes, shoulders squared. For the first time, I didn't look like the fragile daughter they'd dismissed. The brass key in my pocket pressed against my palm, hot as if it had its own pulse. I wondered if they realized yet. This was only the beginning. The house smelled the same. Cedar polish, faint smoke from Dad's old pipe. But the air inside was different now. He'd called it a family meeting. I called it theater. They were all seated when I walked in. Dad at the head of the table, Aunt June with her arms crossed tight, Uncle Ray fiddling with his watch. Marcy hovered near the doorway like a spectator afraid of choosing sides. The trust agreement copy sat in the center. A scarlet pen mark slashed across my name. Dad leaned forward. "Lydia, you've embarrassed us. Clients are asking questions. Do you understand how dangerous this is?" I met his stare. "Do you understand how obvious it looks? A fund without transparency is a sinking ship. I just stopped patching the holes for you." Aunt June slammed her hand down. "Ungrateful girl. We raised you, paid your tuition. And this is your loyalty." The brass key burned in my fist under the table. I wanted to laugh at her revisionist history. They'd raised me like an accessory, not a daughter. Uncle Ray cleared his throat. "You've made your point. But there's a solution. Sign this." He slid a crisp document toward me. A waiver. My rights erased in black ink. The chandelier hummed above us. I ran my finger across the paper, slow enough for them to watch. "Do you think fear is persuasive?" I asked softly. The room fell still. Even Marcy stopped breathing. "I don't sign things anymore without reading them first." I folded the paper in half, slipped it into my blazer and stood. "And trust me, I've read everything." That night I couldn't sleep. The waiver crackled in my bag like a live wire. I placed it on my desk beside the brass key, both staring back at me like twin choices: erase myself or unlock something they feared. At 2:40 a.m. my phone lit again. This time not a call. A voicemail transcribed by the carrier. "You don't know what you're doing, Lydia. You think you're clever, but you'll ruin everything, for yourself, for all of us. Sign the paper. Tomorrow." No signature, but I knew Dad's cadence even when he whispered. I opened the window. Cold night air carried the faint smell of rain. The city was quiet except for one thing. A rhythm, soft, steady. My neighbor's wind chimes clinking like distant applause. I pulled out the original trust ledger. My copy annotated in red. A single clause had always gnawed at me: keyholder rights. A term they never explained. And yet the brass key had been handed to me on my 12th birthday, a ceremony dressed up as tradition. "Keys open more than doors, Lydia." Now the words sharpened into meaning. At dawn I returned to the bank. This time I requested the vault. The manager hesitated, then checked the file. His eyes darted up, surprise flickering. You're the listed key holder?" The brass key slid into the lock with a metallic sigh. The door swung open, revealing rows of boxes, documents, ledgers, and one safe envelope with my name inked across it. Their secrets weren't just financial. They were personal. And they'd entrusted them to me without realizing I could read. Inside the envelope I found more than numbers. Letters, some decades old, traced the family's shadow deals. Loans disguised as gifts, assets shuffled to cousins overseas, signatures forged. Each page smelled faintly of dust and ink, the rot of trust polished to look respectable. One letter stopped me cold. My mother's handwriting. "If Lydia ever asks about the key, tell her it's symbolic." Never let her open the vault. My throat tightened. So she had known. She'd chosen silence. By noon I sat across from a lawyer in a glass tower downtown. She skimmed the documents with quick, sharp eyes. You realize, she said, tapping one clause, this gives you authority not just to suspend distributions, but to demand audits. They're liable to you. Her words clicked like tumblers in a lock. Liability. Authority. Power they thought I'd never claim. That evening I attended the next meeting. The dining room smelled of overcooked roast, their performance of normalcy. Dad began, we hope you've had time to think. I placed the ledger and letters on the table. Paper fanned like evidence in a trial. Aunt June's face drained of color. Uncle Ray muttered, she knows. Dad's hand shook as he reached for the papers. Where did you? The vault, I interrupted. The brass key glinted on the table between us. The one you said was just tradition. The room fractured, voices rising, chairs scraping, but underneath the chaos, I felt a calm I'd never known. They wanted me gone. Instead, I'd made myself unavoidable. The room fell quiet only when I spoke. You thought cutting me out meant freedom. But you handed me the one thing none of you respected. A key. Dad's voice was raw, pleading now. Lydia, we can fix this. We'll bring you back in. Just don't take this further. I studied his hands, once steady, now trembling against the polished table. Aunt June avoided my eyes. Uncle Ray whispered something to Marcy, who stared at me as though I'd split into someone unrecognizable. I slid the brass key across the wood, slow enough for the sound to sting. I don't need to be brought back in. I'm not the fragile girl you voted out. From my bag I pulled a final document, fresh from my lawyer's office. An audit request, legally binding with my signature already inked. I placed it atop the pile of letters, the waiver they'd tried to force on me now buried beneath my truth. Dad's face collapsed into silence. Not anger. Something heavier. Recognition. The kind that tastes like defeat. I won't destroy you, I said softly. But I will hold you accountable. And when the auditors arrive, you'll answer for every signature, every transfer, every lie. Marcy's voice cracked the air. She's right. The chandelier hummed above us, casting fractured light across the table. I gathered my folder, slipped the key back into my pocket. At the doorway I paused. Have you ever had family try to erase you only to watch them fade when you finally spoke? If you have, just say, same in the comments. I left their house not as an exile but as the one who chose.